Hello, everyone. We're going to give it just another minute for people to continue to join in, probably try to get started right at noon. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Teresa McGady. I am with the City of Dayton in the Department of Water, but I am also the co-chair for the Education Committee of the Ohio Stormwater Association. I wanted to welcome you today to WAMO's Luncheon webinar. Today's session will be hosted by Ohio Stormwater Association, and it will be covering how the City of Avon Lake is doing their outfall inspections, the lessons they learned along the way, and changes that have been put in place for a growing suburb. But before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the Ohio Stormwater Association. The Ohio Stormwater Association is dedicated to advancing the management of stormwater and related natural resources through education, leadership, watershed-based coordination, and technical assistance in Ohio. The board is comprised of a very diverse group of people throughout the state of Ohio, stormwater professionals, working in the direction of providing, information to members through Ohio. We have Mark McCabe as the president, Kelly Kubander as the vice president, Regina Collins is the secretary, Bob Lentz our treasurer, and Kathy Wade-Dorman is the past president. If you are interested in joining the Ohio Stormwater Association, it's really easy to sign up. Go to ohioswa.com or wamo.org. You can select stormwater as your area of interest, and we will be in touch to get you signed up as a member. We also have a few different types of committees under the Ohio Stormwater Association. I am part of the education committee. We put on quarterly webinars. Also, we'll host a training session in the fall. We also do have a committee for marketing and membership, a regulatory committee, which keeps up to speed on all the regulations coming from Ohio EPA, and then a transportation committee. So if you have any interest, please reach out. We'd love to have you. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Joe Reitz is the Public Works Director for the City of Avon Lake. He is a registered professional engineer in the state of Ohio and has been employed with the City of Avon Lake for over 32 years in various duties. His current position is for oversight of the city's engineering, service, and planning department, and serves in the capacity of the city's stormwater program manager. These positions offer him a unique opportunity to be the city's code writer, development reviewer, and project enforcement. Currently, the city is working on the final 2 years of combined sewer separations with a recent focus on lateral separations. Mr. Reitz is the one who prepares the budget for the Public Works Department and knows the dealings between the mayor and council and dealing with the public. Mr. Reitz has been an advocate for municipalities in the area of stormwater awareness and has worked with EPA on various training programs. And before I hand it over to you, Joe, I'd like to mention, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat, and either Joe will address them as he's going through the presentation, and or we'll try to get to them at the very end. And with that, Joe, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Reitza, as was stated. I'm Public Works Director for the City of Avon Lake. I do, when I do these presentations, and Teresa did a good job of reading off my bio and so forth, you always sit back and listen to it. And the thing I realized that I've been here for 32 years now. So I've seen a lot of changes happen in the city. I've been involved with the phase 2 NPDES ever since it began, did the original code writing for the city with that. We are just going through a code, planning and zoning code complete overwrite update, but it's a completely new code where we've introduced things, permeable pavements and so forth, that were never in there before. So I'm very anxious to see how that works out and see how the city can move forward. But with that, let me get into this my presentation here. As was stated, please feel free to post questions in there. I'll kind of look off to the side here and see if any comments come up and questions come up. But any of those of you that know me or attended some of my discussions in the past know that I tend to ad lib a little bit. So please feel free to post something in the chat. I'd be glad to address it. So, let's start with basics for the investigation of our storm outfalls, illicit discharges. One of the basic questions that municipalities and everybody needs to look at is, what do you have? How detailed of a plan do you have for storm outfalls that routes? Avon Lake just recently had a situation over the summer where we had somebody dumping chlorine water into a storm sewer, and it was a very short distance to the outfall to get into Hyder Creek. We had EPA out here and DNR out here trying to investigate it several times. And the number one thing that we did was we pulled out our GIS maps to show where that water could be coming from. We never did find the source. It had literally 4 weeks between these discharges, but by the time we got out there and counted the fish kills, there was no residuals left in the storm pipes. But you need to have, municipalities have stormwater managers in place that reviews submissions and does updates and illicit discharges and so forth, does your outfall inspections. In most cases, it's the city engineer. Plan requirements have grown over the years, as we all know, to include more review than just stormwater quantity, but it's also quality standards now. And your inspectors and the people that you have working for you out there need to know who to go to, where to call, whatever the case may be. In our recent issue with the chlorine, it was a matter of myself and Avon Lake. We have an in-house testing lab at our water plant that we used and utilized to do testing as quickly as we can. So that was very, very beneficial to me. But we, like you, have the same typical outfalls. This is one of our residential outfalls into one of our creeks, and you can see how they, ad-libbed and lengthened, or I should say, raised the grade behind the head wall that was originally designed just to.
Joe?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we can't see your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I see it. Nobody else does.
Yeah, I think if you go to the share screen, the green button, you should, and it should ask you if you have multiple screens, which screen to share.
Hold on. Share screen. Is that better?
Yeah, and if you could go to presentation mode.
Okay, sorry about that. Here, I was
no worries.
Run with it. How's that?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
No, it's Teresa. That's funny because my screen didn't change, but yours did. You guys couldn't see it. So anyway, let me get back into this. So, as I was stating before, it comes down to, who is doing your investigations, who is doing the reporting, who is writing up reports. In my case, we use a lot of summer interns when we're doing our outfall inspections. The one that I hired this year actually has his own drone because ours kind of got destroyed in a windstorm last year. But he came out and is doing he was able to help us out with our inspections because, whether we have a head wall like this in a creek that we can get to where, people have customized it for the lack of a better term, where they raise the elevation and raise the grade behind it, versus an outfall like this that is literally hanging over the bluff of Lake Erie. So, how do you get to them? How can you access, and the big thing being, how can you assess the conditions of these outfalls? In our case, we've got a bluff over Lake Erie that's 25 to 35 feet tall, depending upon the location within the city. And, we've got a number of these pipes that are just hanging out there. And, it's very important for us to document internally these conditions. And then, doing our annual inspections, whether it's for flow, whether it's just overall conditions, has been a big thing for us, making sure that we stay on top of it, and making sure that we can also keep records and keep tracks. So, I mean, that's kind of, that's very important to us. Our municipal programs, how many outfalls do you have? Do you respond to people? Do your response to people also know and have access to the files? We have GIS here in the city that's on several computers that our inspectors can get to, our field people can get to, even sharing it with our service guys that might have to get a call out in the middle of the night because of a blockage and so forth. So we keep that very accessible to everybody. We're actually introducing a app for the residents that can be used for them to call in, just go on the app, take a picture of whatever the issue is, whether it's a drain that's blocked or whatever, and send it to us. And then we basically have a record that we can investigate and then respond to them right through our phone apps. So that's been that's something that we're in the test phases, and we'll really be getting into it this late summer into the fall even more. And here's the big one too: is that, are you being proactive or reactive? Avon Lake has a lot of people watching us. Social media is a huge watchdog, and I think that's something that's really changed over the last 5+ years for all of us doing our jobs, because the friends of Avon Lake, the families of Avon Lake, the different websites that I'm members of, it's interesting what people post out there, much less what things that the people are complaining about. I mean, and sometimes I just have to take my phone and put it down when I'm at home or on the weekend, or I just got back from vacation, and my wife literally took my phone out of my hands a couple of times because I was watching things and wanting to respond to these comments. But overall, we are all watched. We are all being watched by multiple people. Do you have annual inspections of your outfalls? Do you document the conditions? As I said, we have a report form that we use, and I'd be glad to share it with people, which includes downloading the photo and the date and time that it was put in. It's a multiple page form. I think it was a standardized form that we got from EPA that we've adapted to us. When was the last time you put a camera in the outfall? We've been working with our Avon Lake Regional Water to do some sewer work and some drainage work, particularly for the properties north of Lake Road to Lake Erie. And in which case I'm going to be doing some outfall replacements, because the corrugated metal pipes that were put in there that are hanging over the bluff are in poor condition. Some of those areas we're actually going to be upsizing those outfalls also. Do you know limits of your tributary areas? We have 23 different tributaries within Avon Lake. 3 of them are natural tribs, and the rest of them have been, as development has occurred, have been put in, man-made. One of them was a small tributary that was a creek that the city put a large 108-inch outfall to Lake Erie. So, do you know where these limits are? Where the water goes when you get a complaint, when you have to do investigations? And do you have all this on your GIS database? With us, with GIS is in there, the reports are in there. It's very helpful as far as history goes to document all of this as thoroughly as you can. What about the storm outfalls from municipal facilities? Are you testing your own runoff? As you should be. And do you have documented process for all of this? That should be in your overall stormwater management program. Do you document these conditions? Do you inspect for erosion around the outfall itself? We recently had an outfall here that's adjacent to a neighborhood park that that the shoreline erosion protection that was in there, it washed out. So it washed out around the head wall and undermined the head wall and made its way up to the top of the bluff. And our storm outfall is fine, but the neighboring property there right next to that neighborhood park has some issues that they've got to deal with due to the erosion. So uh, once again, it's knowing your outfalls, knowing your tribs, knowing who's responsible for what. And in this particular case, our outfall is on the adjacent property, but the erosion started from right adjacent to our storm outfall. And in this case, we have just an easement for their storm outfall. So we're not ultimately responsible for the sinkhole because it's on the neighboring properties. So, I just, we all have to stay on top of that to know who's responsible for what and where. And looking at the comments from Dana there, confirm with me to post this file. I will be glad to share this. I will share this with Dana after the meeting, and she can post it. And I know it's also being taped. So there are outfalls from your tributary areas and from your construction sites. How do you treat them? Do you treat them differently? Do you have the same? Both have outlets. And once again, in our case with the 23 outfalls that we've got, we're looking at the drainage areas for those small little sub tribs that have development going on. They have unique characteristics for erosion, and are they all in place? And what inspection policies have you created? Are they being followed? They're inspections after a rain event and so forth. Are they giving you the reports? Are they making sure all of that's documented? Because we're the ones that all of you listening to this session here are the ones that are going to get the calls the same as I do, as far as why is there mud in this creek? Where is it coming from? And if it's coming from your construction site, you're jumping on that as soon as possible. Our SWP3 flow charts there. Yeah, this is a technical document, but we could all sit down there and look at this and we could all follow it. But holy smokes, this is a massive diagram there. But nowhere on this does it mention anything about outfalls, inspections, and testing. And how often. And no, I'm just joking when I say that, but it wasn't a wiring diagram for an old car. These are not always that complicated, but we just have to have our eyes open, have our people have our eyes open. In my case, I work with a building department to make sure that when they're out on a site that they're keeping an eye on things to make sure that whether it's filter cloth, whether it's the dandy bags, whatever protection is out there, is still in good shape. And then we all have to adapt our work and work on discovering additional issues. Soil and water conservation districts, consulting engineers, who does who does their outfall inspections? Their outside consultants do it. Who does your SWP3 plan review? And if this isn't an outfall for an active site, need to have a designated stormwater manager that coordinates all of this with everybody. This is the person that initiates and follows through on the SWP3 submissions, reviews, updates. All of our SWP3, all of our plans are changing. It's an active construction site. Something's changing. It's moving around. Areas are getting stabilized. New areas are being added to it. Just had a meeting with some residents this morning in a subdivision that, now that the subdivision is winding down, they want to know about who's going to do the final grade on the common areas and before they take over ownership of it. We're all having these dialogues with people. And in this case, fortunately, the HOA, the people that lived in the HOA reached out to us to ask about certain things like the retention basin and outfalls going into the retention basin and where the pipes go. And they fortunately did their homework before they took over control. Plan requirements have gone to review more than just water quantity, water quality standards, outfalls inspection from site erosion control, all of that being managed not only during construction, but then after construction. And also working with these people to make sure that they're doing what they need to do as far as ongoing maintenance. And revisions, and as I said, revisions and updates will happen. What Avon Lake did at first is that we started looking into cross connections from Mulligan mine sewers, and we found more than we bargained for. We're still dealing with it with the storms that we had last week. As I said, I was actually on vacation and came back, and we had not only a lot of severe storm damage from the winds and trees falling over, but we also had sanitary sewer I&I issues. And I'm going to be setting up a meeting here shortly with them because our guys went out and checked all of our outfalls and checked our pipes, and pipes were flowing fine, but somehow we were getting storm I&I into the sanitary, and that's still on me an ongoing issue that we've got to work with. We bit off a lot at first, and 5 years of biting, to be truthful, and we're still working on it, and we're still finding connections and cross connections to this day. Construction site runoff and erosion is our biggest issue. We go over SWP3 plans with the contractors and focus on their offsite discharges. Their offsite dump sites, whether it's within our community or within a neighboring community. We all have all the responsible parties signed. Does everyone know what BMPs are required in special preservation areas? As I stated earlier, my meeting with those residents, they wanted to know about the BMPs that they had in their area. They wanted to know about the preservation areas for the wetlands that are supposed to be protected. And in some cases, they were asking about, can they clear trees? Can they add drains back there? And, in this particular case, we have a very large area of wetlands that has to be preserved. So, naturally, the answer is that they can't add to it because, that's going to cause problems with the Corps. And this was another one where the contact person, and in this case, with my HOA, it was the contact person for the person that will be, the new president of their HOA. And hopefully, when we're having these pre-construction meetings and when we're having follow-up meetings with the subdivisions and so forth, hopefully it becomes and maintains itself as a friendly relationships. Joe asked a question here, who typically owns it and is responsible for the outfalls or storm catch basins? We manage the catch basins in the roadways, but we do have developments that have private rear yard. We have areas that have vortex regulators in the streets, which are ours to manage, back from the ones that were put in the early 90s. But retention basins, all but one residential retention basin in the city is owned by the HOAs. And we do our annual inspections, we do follow-ups with them, we do regular meetings with them to discuss the maintenance and upkeep of their retention basins. But most of, and I can't say all of, but most of those outfalls that we have that go directly out into Lake Erie, most of them we have easements over, so we will assume responsibility. Some of them that have had to be updated and upgraded and so forth over the years, we've had to acquire easements because for whatever reason, no easements were ever donated. So we work with property owners, especially for those ones that go out to Lake Erie, because we want to own and maintain those so that we can keep a better eye on things, but we also need access. Inspection requirements. The inspections need to start prior to any site work. Inspections include all sites where the overall plan of development disturbs 1 or more acres. We all know this, but it also needs to include those fill and borrow pits. And ultimately it gets down to a bigger and bigger thing as time goes on is what credentials does your inspector have that's out there doing this stuff? And when we do inspections, we do them, the inspections need to occur at least once per month. MS4s can establish more frequent inspections within 24 hours of a rainfall event. This all has to do with your currently active SWP3 plants. But once that water gets into that storm sewer and gets into that creek, now you're dealing with an outfall to a creek. And we've had more and more of that as some of this development on the south side of the city has gone in, as they're expanding and going into these newer areas, and they're dumping directly into some of these natural waterways. They're creating new outfalls into, in our case, Gable Creek or Hyder Creek. And we need to make sure that the overall sites are being managed, because once it gets into the creek, then it's a bigger issue. site inspection protocol. We identify ourselves when we're going out to the owner, and this I could have probably changed the slide to say site inspection and property inspection, because this also includes us going out onto those outfalls onto Lake Road and outfalls that might cross into private property without easements. So I make sure, my guys have ID cards that the police department's printed off, so that when they go out there, they have a City of Avon Lake shirt on. They'll go out, knock on the door, say, hey, I'm out here to look at this outfall that, goes along the side of your house, and tell them what the purpose is. Tell them, let them know that we're documenting it. And, best to visit when the weather conditions are clear, needless to say, 72 hours after a rainfall event. But we have had to go out there when we're doing active testing, when we're trying to identify, a connection and so forth. So we're going that extra step to make sure that we talk to the property owners and let them know that we're out there, so that we don't end up with problems, much less you hate to have somebody let their dog loose on you when you're out in the backyard. But be safe first and foremost. If access to an outfall is restricted, we take samples from upstream manholes. We had adapted an old painter's pole, fiberglass painter's pole it's a 20-foot pole that we put a stainless steel dog bowl on the end, so that we can dip into a manhole without having to try to reach out over the top of the bluff. And knock on wood, that's been working very well for us for about the past 5 years. Be safe. We don't go into any manholes without gear. We utilize equipment that doesn't require to have a person go in there, because once again, I can't stress enough about being safe when we're out there. And you all still with me? I appreciate you all taking the time and letting me talk about this, because this is just like the image there shows, this is a lot of paperwork for all of us. But when we get that audit from EPA, you'll need to have all that paperwork in order to, from your annual report that says, what you found and what you didn't find and how you resolved any issues. It's all about documenting this and making sure that you keep those records for the future. How we did in fall inspections is we had an inspection team open up manholes or climb into ditches and over bluffs. Well, we got away from that. We had a dozen CSOs that are now closed, but some are still partially active because we're still working with EPA to do a study about our 2 interceptor sewers, and our Lake Road interceptor sewer and our Walker Road interceptor sewer, because we've got some I into those sanitary sewers. We're testing during dry weather events only, working upstream from the system if we've identified sources and if we've identified some problems. We didn't always find them. People dumping can be sneaky. As I stated earlier, the one where the people must have either shocked their pool and dumped it into the creek. We didn't find the particular property, but we sent letters out after both incidences, and after the second one, we haven't had any follow-up events. The second one that we had a minimal fish kill, but it was enough of a dump that one of the neighbors that had a patio right up on the creek said that they noticed the chlorine smell. So we're actively watching that and going to stay on top of it, because at some point we'll figure out who it was. We had our, once again, we had them open up manholes and so forth, and we've actually gone and bought a second drone, which the Lake Erie winds weren't kind of the first one, but after repairing it, unfortunately, I had an in-house guy that was really good at doing repairs. But we just recently purchased another drone just to go back out there, because I was so pleased with how successful it was for having our drones, having that drone that we could go out there and look at those pipes as they're going out into Lake Erie. Council has, and what we're doing next is we've created a SID along the lake shore, and the SID will allow, the improvement district will allow the city to work with homeowners in building erosion control structures through low interest loans. Our focus has been on the properties on either side of our existing outfalls, because the city is going to take advantage of the SID to go offer loans to do upgrades, repairs, and shoreline protection for those outfalls. As I had said, whether it's replacement, whether it's upsizing, whether it's repairing something that's been damaged, You know, we've had, you know, back when I first started in the city in the late 80s, you know, we had some heavy storms at the time where, you know, people were losing feet of property along the lake. Well, that corrugated metal pipe that was hanging out there, you know, got beat up and got bent over and is broken off. And now some of those pipes that I can remember going in originally, the inverts have rusted out. So we've got to do some replacement on those because, you know, if the inverts rusted out, you know, we have at least one that we have some erosion just simply caused by the the invert rusting out. And in other cases, we've actually put in slip liners in those outfalls just to restore, not only restore the flow, but restore the condition as the neighborhoods were building up around them. The SIDs are a huge issue because it's going to give the city the opportunity to work with property owners on erosion projects and, you know, reestablish some of this Lake Erie shoreline, and all pun intended, to make them rock solid once again. All right, I got to get jokes in here when I can. You know, lessons learned, and this is a funny one because this is literally a lesson learned by multiple people and multiple inspectors, is don't drop your cameras into a manhole. Clean out your sample collector, because we had a situation where we went out and took a couple tests, and here to come to find out that our guy wasn't cleaning them out between taking samples. So, you know, work with the testing lab for the appropriate times and days. You know, in our case, they only do them a couple, you know, 3 days out of the week because of the weekends, and they don't want to pay for overtime. So unless there's an emergency, I'm generally not trying to incite myself to pay for overtime. But, you know, people think that dumping leaves in the creek prevents erosion. Man, that's still an educational project that I'm still battling with all these years. And, you know, water still runs downhill. And anybody that's dealt with a shoreline contractor knows that they are unique individuals, because we've had to go out and pursue them about their shoreline projects that they're putting in there, and how they're dumping and what materials they're dumping. So I've got to speed dial to ODNR when I need assistance on that one. And outfall inspection checklist, you know, bring your pad, pencil, bring your, you know, iPad, and use your SWP3 plans if it's appropriate. Note any unique areas. You know, this little photo here is actually adjacent to one of our parks, and, you know, you can see how that pipe's way up above the grade there, but you can also see how that erosion around the upside, when you get up above the shale level, has had an impact on that outfall. And note where a plan might need to be revised based upon any construction in the area, and you know, copying appropriate people on report if you found that this was something caused by upland improvements. And take your time, and please don't rush when you're doing these things. Enforcement program does not need to be a bad word. You know, Dan Bogoeski, I respect him immensely. He is the one that said, you know, we need to get people to do voluntary compliance. We need to educate them on why certain things need to be done. You know, policy, but on the same hand, your policy for enforcement needs to be escalated. The inspectors need to clearly document all aspects of that. I'm a huge fan of pre-construction videos, and I don't care if it's us working on a sewer, working on an outfall, whatever we're doing. I am such a huge fan because that's helped us so many times. And once again, having a competent inspector is key to doing whatever inspection you're doing, especially in our case with the outfalls and sampling. Voluntary compliance, once again, let's want them to do what's right. You know, don't need to get to the point of handcuffs, although I have to say this spring I had to issue a stop work order on the site in order for them to get caught up to speed on the work that they were doing, you know, which included holding off on building permits and inspections, threaten them with penalties. In the city's case, it's $200 per day, but it compounds every day that that violation is still out there. And I don't always jump into fines, and but I also have my zoning board of appeals and my environmental affairs advisory board, or both my appeals boards, should I make a decision depending upon what it is. So they are my they're my appeals if I send a violation letter of some sort, but fortunately it's never had to get to that point. They haven't had to make me escalate it that far, but I appreciate that because I'm trying to work with them. I'm trying to work with whoever that property owner is, whoever that developer is, whoever is tributary to that outfall. I'm trying to make sure that they will understand why we have to do what we're doing, much less why they're being penalized or being threatened with penalties if they're not doing something right. Um, Eugene asked a question here. Am I familiar with the illegal chemical dumping that manifests as a fish kill on Cleveland Metro Parks property in 2012? There may be some useful parallels to be made. So I appreciate that, and I will look into that a little bit further. Once again, as I stated before the screen came up, appeals board, I actually have two groups that can fill into that board, but in my cases, as far as my regular meetings with the Environmental Affairs Advisory Board, it's a good group of people. It's made up of residents and it's made up of businesses. We haven't had to bring anybody in to appeal a finding, but they do ask what the status is. There's my stormwater subcommittee. Once again, these are residents and businesses in Avon Lake. That's a subcommittee on the Environmental Affairs Advisory Board that I give monthly updates to. I attend those meetings. They ask what we're doing, but I greatly appreciate the people having an interest in that because they just want to know what we're doing. I have some of them that attend some of these webinars that we've been doing. Some of them come to, we've got people that have come to some of these stormwater conferences where I might speak or I might just run into them and hang out with them. But it's very important to have the right chain of commands, as it may be, when these issues come up. In a very recent one, once again this summer, was we had a 30-year-old home. We were doing outfall inspections into the Gable Creek, found a lot of fecal, and just so I don't know how we stumbled across it now after all this time, but it was a 30-year-old home that after we got with Regional Water and we threw some cameras in, some laterals, we found out that the house laterals were initially installed, but they were swapped. And so this house for 30 years has been dumping sewage in there. It was a couple, and just somehow we just never caught it. But some residents, once again going back to social media, some residents have noted that downstream from there is a park, and they noticed smell was an issue in there, and we started going upstream until we found this house and found at the one outlet into box culvert at that location, and sure as heck we found that this house was cross-connected from the day it was built. We worked with Avon Lake Regional Water and we got it repaired within 48 hours, but it was a matter of having the right people involved and bringing them up to speed, and we got it fixed. But wow, I mean, that was something that has been that way for a very long time. And continue with your educational programs. Lake Erie starts here. Many of you have heard that from the Neopipe group that I'm a member of. Please, we can't stress enough how important it is that we all get out there, reach out to our residents, give them as much information as possible. When in the case of Avon Lake, when we roll out this new planning and zoning code to residents, the new section that has to do particularly with BMPs and has to do with permeable pavements. I mean, that's a huge thing. I've been wanting to do this on several projects within our city, and now that we've written it into the code, and we've got a formal process that developers can follow to hopefully do some creative BMPs that will not only be an asset to their subdivisions, but will also make it easier for the HOAs to maintain, because that's that's a big thing for us too, is making sure that everybody knows how to maintain what they're owning, what they're taking over ownership of. the storm outfalls here. I know not, you know, not everybody's in the same situation as we are because we're being right directly on Lake Erie, but some of those outfalls out there were just put in. It used to be a ditch between properties that went from Lake Road. The original 1923 improvement plans from ODOT for US 6 Lake Road showed all those showed all of those outlets or ditches or whatever that were used for the roadside drainage that was put in on Route 6. And now, we're going out there and looking through the documents and finding that there was never any easements established, whether it was an individual property owner that was building. But one of the more unique ones is we had an old vitrified clay pipe that went down through the middle of a yard, took two 90-degree bends to relocate it over to the property line, and then went out to the lake. And when the people went to go build a house, there was a problem with that pipe. So we had to work with them, do a quick take of the easement so we could get in and do some repairs of that storm outfall. But that was just something that we discovered. Everything worked fine, but when the new house came in and what they were planning to do kind of elevated our urgency to do something more, because it was not on any of our records as far as how that work was routed, much less the fact that it literally took a couple 90-degree bends in the middle of people's front yards. But fortunately, we had cooperative property owners that worked with us, had a very aggressive law director that was able to put together the documents in a timely manner. And then that would give me the access and rights to go in there with my guys to go in and replace that section of storm sewer going to the outfall. Joe asked a question: are roof drains usually allowed to connect into the stormwater catch basins? Yes, they are. Roof drains are. As a matter of fact, the lateral project that we just are winding down with has required 2,500, almost 2,500 homes in Avon Lake to remove their footer tiles in downspouts from the old combination sewers, which are now sanitary sewers. So we went through that project over 5 years and went across the city to have them remove those clean water connections from the sanitary sewer. And now, with the storms that we just had, as I stated, we've got to do some further investigation, because all those people have separated the laterals on their properties and they've been allowed to reconnect their downspouts into that system. But yet we still had water coming up out of floor drains and basins. So we've got to figure out where some of that, how that water was getting into the sanitary sewers, much less getting into the house penetration. So a good question. But yes, we prior to all of that lateral separation, we were making everybody splash their gutter drains onto the lawn. So, but with that, I would be glad to take any additional questions from anybody, whether you just turn on your mic at this point or post it on the chat. I would be more than happy to take any questions. As I said, I'm a stormwater geek, just like all of you guys are. I live and breathe this stuff. I was in Seattle visiting my brother when this storm came through, and I saw pictures on social media about water flooding the streets, and so needless to say, you can imagine how excited I was to come back to work on Monday to face all of those comments and questions. So, but we've got more work to do and got a lot of correspondence that we have to put back out to the residents. So at that, if Teresa wants to jump back in here, please feel free.
Yeah, Joe, that was really a great presentation. And as a fellow MS4 program manager, there was a lot I got out of that, about reminders about what we need to be doing here in the city as well. So thank you for that. I actually have a few questions. I was curious, you had mentioned about using GIS and that some of the forms might be GIS based. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So all of your inspection forms that you use when you're doing outfall inspections, you can fill those out like on an iPad.
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
Which has been very helpful, especially since I'm using, college graduate interns in the summertime, and and just bring them up. They can bring up the previous one on the iPad. They can take it out there, fill it out for the current inspections. Plus they see what the last inspection showed. So that's been very helpful.
Yeah, we have in the city of Dayton, we use a similar system. And it looks like somebody's, Mary Helen Smith has asked for you to share a sample of the GIS inspection form.
Yeah, I would be glad to share that with everybody.
That would be great. Yeah, I know that's been super helpful for us. It's so nice to get rid of that pen and paper like we used to do. It keeps everything consolidated, and it is, like you said, it's so great to be able to go to past data and see, you know, if this has been an issue for a while or if it's a new issue. So it's been great. And please, you know, if you have any other questions, please submit them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we'll try to see if that registers and give you an opportunity to ask the question directly. I have one other question while we maybe wait for a few other questions to come in. And I don't know if I heard correctly, but did you say you have pre-construction videos that you share with the contractor?
Yes, yes. Or if it's a city project, we just make them do that as part of our project to document all those conditions. And because in some of the cases we have short distances between our project and the outfall to the creek, I want to make sure that we document all of it, and that's including any sediment buildup at that discharge pipe out into the creek. You know, so I want to make sure that we document it as thoroughly as possible. And boy, that's been hugely helpful from somebody, you know, whatever the project might be, whether it's a road project, you know, documenting all the conditions, whether it's the catch basin conditions, so it's the outfall conditions, it's the creek conditions, has been a lifesaver for us on this. We just expanded a retention basin in one of our parks that the city of Avon Lake and Bay Village owns, and we did an entire pre-construction video of the existing retention basin because we were adding on to it to make sure that, you know, us excavating an additional area right on the basin, that we didn't cause any problems from the discharge pipe or the inlet pipes into the existing basin. So.
If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to type them in. Joe, if you don't mind switching over, and I'll start sharing my screen. I have a few concluding remarks.
Did I end my share then?
Yeah. Let's see if I can switch over to mine.
There we go.
Great. And Dana has sent a reminder that the recording and PowerPoint slides will be available at WAMO. If there was anybody that wasn't able to attend the session, or you know, if you want to refer back to it at a later date, that'll be available.
Yeah, Teresa, if I can ad lib a little bit here, you know.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Something else that has really come up to my attention, especially, you know, during COVID, everybody was home, so they're watching things a little bit closer. And in our case, we ran into a situation where we had two properties that were doing shoreline projects, and they had an outfall on their project. And, you know, it turns out that these people brought the properties and there was an outfall there. One of them, we discovered that the shoreline contractor was very creative on how he extended the outfall, which I can't tell you how long ago it was done, but how they extended it, which really did cause the city an issue. Mind you, it was flowing, but as far as long-term maintenance and so forth, it was really something that, you know, now is the time to address it with them, whether I'm giving them pipe and giving them materials to do that and having their contractor do it. I you know, have worked with two of these properties just in the last, you know, 6 months or so, just to make sure that long-term wise that we're going to have access and we'll have the ability to do any cleaning or whatever. But it's just amazing how some of these projects go, you know, when you get the submission of what they're originally going to do and what it ends up being in the end, can sometimes not necessarily be the same.
It looked like Nicholas had sent in a question about should we be safe? And I've asked him to maybe elaborate on that question. I'm not sure exactly what he means, but do you have any ideas, Joe?
Yeah, well, in our case, it has, with us being safe, it has to do with going in those manholes along Lake Road, and literally safe was not only if you have somebody that's got the confined space certification, that's one thing, but in our case, it's also going in old manholes that have the old cast iron steps that might be in poor condition. I myself have been in those in the past and realized that that's a hazard. So, making sure that people are going, if they are going down there and have the combined space certification, making sure that they have all the right equipment, or if at all you can avoid doing that. And that's why that fiberglass pole with the dog dish has actually been very helpful for us, because that means that I can send one guy out, one individual out to do sampling, and I don't need to. I can get more done in a shorter period of time because we're going out and taking a dozen samples in any given day.
Yeah, and we've utilized a rope attached to a bag, the roll pack bags. I don't know if you've seen those. They have like the metal piece at the top, and we'll attach that to the end of a rope with a carabiner on the end, and that's worked pretty well to grab samples from a manhole as well.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
I want to thank you, Teresa, and I want to thank everybody for allowing me to come in here and do this. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, Joe. Covered a lot of good information that I think will be very helpful to a lot of MS4 program managers. Now I'll just go over a few concluding remarks. We want to make sure we thank all of our Ohio Stormwater Association Platinum sponsors, Butler County Stormwater District, the City of Dayton Department of Water, Wessler Engineering, our gold level sponsors, and then our silver level sponsors are listed here. We're able to put on educational events throughout the year thanks to our sponsors. If your organization or company is interested in sponsoring, we have opportunities for platinum, gold, and silver partner levels. If you are interested, please contact Kathy Dorman, Kelly Kubander, or Bob Lentz at the email addresses shown here. And once again, if you're interested in joining the Ohio Stormwater Association, we would love to have you. We can get you involved in a specific committee based on your interest. Please feel free to reach out to any Ohio Stormwater Association board member or Kathy Dorman, and we'll get you signed up. We also have a few upcoming WAMO events. As Dana has put in the chat, there's a link to the annual WAMO conference, which will be held November 3rd and 4th at the Crown Plaza, Columbus North. It is titled Engaging Water Professionals Through the Decades. And if you're interested in registering for that great event, please click on that link there and you can sign up through their website. We also have 2 Ohio Stormwater Association webinars coming up. One will be on September 9th. It will feature Chagrin River Watershed Partners and their model erosion and sediment control and comprehensive stormwater codes. And then we also are scheduling a November webinar, which I believe will be November 11th, and it will be on solar farms and stormwater runoff control. And more information will be sent out here soon with the ability to sign up for both of those free events. I would also like to take a minute to thank our speaker, Joe Reitz, with the City of Avon Lake, and our host, Dana, who's with the Water Management Association of Ohio. She does a lot of the background work that we don't see, but her work is instrumental in putting on these sessions. So thank you to both of you. And with that, I believe we can leave the meeting. And if you have any other questions, I believe Joe is willing to help with any questions that you may have in regards to this. And as a reminder, this session will be posted on WAMO's website for further reference.
And if I can put one final plug in there, my email address is jrreitz@avonlake.org. If you've got any more questions after this, or anything else, please feel free to get a hold of me.
Great. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Dana, and hope to see you at the next session.
Bye-bye. Thank you.